Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone today to our presentation, our webinar on Decarbonize, a web platform for building climate change solutions. My name is Sean McClowry. I'm the General Manager for Information Management. I'll be one of the presenters today. I'll also have Brian Houston presenting. He's our Community Manager for the Decarbonize platform. So some people on the call maybe haven't attended one of our webinars before, so I just want to explain the question process. So you can ask questions throughout the webinar. I will actually I'll be tracking these questions throughout the process. So you actually write the questions into the screen. At the end of the webinar process, we'll actually go through all the questions. So I'm hoping we'll have time today to get through all of the questions that we have. If we don't, what we're going to do, and we're going to actually do this for all the questions, we're going to write an insight. So that's effectively like a blog for us on Decarbonize that summarizes our answers to all the questions that we have today. And we'll also embed this webinar into the process. So we've got a webinar in this kind of North American time zone as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So we're trying to cover the world with multiple webinars on the Decarbonize platform. And so we'll pull all these questions together into that post. So if you've got any questions today, just go ahead and ask them throughout the session. So what we're going to cover today is really kind of four major areas. So first we'll give an introduction to the overall Decarbonize platform, why we built the approach, and why we think it's important for accelerating solutions to climate change. Second, we'll actually go into how to use the Decarbonize platform. So this session is really focused on end users and people that are actually going to come and read information on Decarbonize and submit information to the platform. So that's where a lot of our focus will actually be. So how to actually use the system, how do you make it useful to you? Then we'll actually talk about some of our special features of Decarbonize. So what actually makes the web platform different, as well as how we can actually build other web platforms using the approach. And then finally, I'll hand over to Brian, who's going to specifically talk about how we're engaging with our community, whether it's the professional community or a special technology-oriented members of the general public. So we'll close by talking about that today. So without further ado, I'll actually go into the presentation. So first of all, what is Decarbonize? So Decarbonize is a new web venture launched by the Global CCS Institute in March this year. It's a web platform focused around both the professional energy community and the more technical general public. Really what it's about is optimizing access to information. So you can sort of think of Decarbonize as an advanced web library full of solutions to climate change. And I'll talk a lot more in detail about that approach through this presentation. And though the Institute launched Decarbonize, it's really a collaboration between hundreds of organizations. And so think of Decarbonize as sort of like a knowledge exchange of information where we've got the best information from hundreds of organizations and individuals around the world. So the next point of understanding what Decarbonize is actually to understand what's on Decarbonize. And so if you look at these two columns here, we talk about the different technologies that we cover and the different subjects that are covered on those different technologies. And so as you would expect, the Global CCS Institute, we have information on CCS on the platform. But where we've evolved our approach from what we've done in the past is that we've also got quite a bit of information on there for other key technologies for decarbonization. And this map of key technologies directly maps to what the International Energy Agency says are the keys to decarbonizing the energy sector. So you'll find information on energy efficiency, fuel switching, nuclear, a number of renewable technologies, and energy management and storage. And then within that kind of overall technology concept, you'll find things like costs information, health, safety, and the environment, policy, law, regulation, public engagement, technology, and risk management. And so really what our goal is to provide a set of information resources across the whole decarbonization stack. And so we look for this to be your kind of place you can go for any information around decarbonization, particularly of the energy sector. And so it's information from all different sources, but it's sort of like a go-to place or a one-stop shop for information. So Decarbonize is really part of our overall digital ecosystem of platforms, and so we've got 4 layers to this approach. There's a social web layer, and you'll be very familiar with a lot of these systems. That's like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. That's where actually a lot of the people are around the world, and we think it's important to engage with them. But we're not building our own platforms for that. We're actually just engaging in those external communities. Then secondarily, it's the publishing layer, and this is where Decarbonize fits, and this is where some of our other web systems sit out on the public web. And so this is really about optimizing information findability and giving us access to external audiences. And we use the same web technology for all these sites. So we have 8 sites today, and everything is centered around Decarbonize as the central hub, and we push information to these different sites. And I'll talk about this more in the presentation. And then there's 2 layers that most of you don't see. The first is the collaboration layer, and that's private extranet type groups. So some people on this call might be members of those groups. But we keep this quite distinct from the publishing layer. This is a place for people to collaborate in a private fashion. So you can have some collaboration on the Decarbonize platform, and certainly there's a lot of engagement out on the social web. But our collaboration layer are really, think of them as separate extranets around different subjects, primarily in our case around carbon capture and storage. And then the final layer, the collection layer, that's really a back-end support for us as an organization, for us to ensure that we're getting high-quality information that we can put out into these different systems, particularly the publishing layer. So like I said, the most important layer of this to think about today is the publishing layer. That's where Decarbonize sits, but we'll also talk about how we engage out on the social web. So just to kind of add a bit more detail to what I said earlier, in terms of who built Decarbonize, there's kind of 2 ways to look at this. So the Institute built the Decarbonize platform from a software development standpoint, from kind of our content management team that sits behind the scenes. But it's really a joint effort. I mean, we've got information from about 450 different organizations currently on the platform, and frankly, that's growing all the time. So we've got hundreds of different individuals that have provided insights on the system. And so you can actually go out and see that it's a really diverse view of information. And what we're really trying to do, as I said, is build a clearinghouse of information that's the best information on solutions to decarbonization. What we also try to do is actually really showcase these different organizations and individuals. So there's like if you browse to the organizations page of the site, you'll see that you can click through to any of these different organizations. Some are technology companies, some are governments, some are multilateral organizations or NGOs, and you can see the information specifically related to that organization. So the branding of Decarbonize is it's really quite light, because what we're really trying to do is actually showcase the information. It's not, we don't see this as the Institute's corporate platform. We see it as a knowledge sharing hub. And then to make sure that we're actually putting this information up in a proper way, we follow really diligent processes around copyright and brand protection. So we're actually not trying to change the brand of any of these organizations. We want to actually highlight their brand when they're doing good work. From an end user perspective, we just want this to be the place to go to find the best information. So there's really 3 reasons why we built the Decarbonize system. So the first is we think that a big part of actually solving the problem around climate change is better information sharing. And we think that over the last few years, we've actually gotten quite good at actually how you do this, specifically within the clean energy space. So we wanted to bring those lessons learned to bear. The second thing is that we actually wanted to better reach our audience from a CCS perspective. So Global CCS Institute's mission is to accelerate deployment of carbon capture and storage. In order for us to better do this, we want to actually reach a broader audience. And so what we're finding is that the broader technology community actually knows certain things about other technologies, particularly areas like renewables or energy efficiency. We want them to know about CCS as well. So this is not an advocacy site, so we're actually not there to try to convince people what the best technology is. We're actually operating under a model that there's a portfolio of solutions required for climate change. And we're actually just going to share the best information from things that are happening, things that are real on projects. And CCS is one of those things. But like I said, the scope that we're really going for actually matches to the earlier pages. It's the full suite of decarbonization technologies. And then the third thing is that we look to provide knowledge sharing as a service for other organizations. So we have work that we do, such as actually running the European Commission's CCS Projects Network or running the International CCS Test Center Network, where we're effectively providing knowledge sharing services for a fee for other organizations. And that's a model that we think, once again, we've gotten pretty good at, and we'd like to help out other organizations as well if we see it's quite in line with our mission. So I'm just going to go into some more detail then from an end user perspective, how you can actually use Decarbonize. And really this is the one of the key things I'd really like you to take away from today is how can you get out there and start using the system. So the platform itself today has over 20,000 resources, and this is really growing quickly. So I think when I did this presentation a week or two ago, it was 20,000. Now it's something like 21,500. So Decarbonize is really a library that's growing every day. It's got 3 types of content on there. Publications, which are large, sometimes large detailed reports. Insights, which are typically the views of an individual, and they're sort of similar to what you might think of as blogs. And the third is news, which is really covering timely events. So that's where actually the 20,000 resources come from. Think of Decarbonize is quite an advanced library where you've got fairly sophisticated search and browse capabilities for this information, and we've really optimized the approach for external search engines. So what we're trying to do is actually reach our audience that primarily comes in through search or social media channels in the most effective way. And like I said, we're adding new information to the platform every single day. We're not trying to be a general purpose aggregator site that's not going to provide value to our users. We're trying to really find the best information and republish that. And so the processes that we have around quality reviews and copyright checks and disseminating information is very important to making the platform work well and make sure that the information that we're putting on it is the most useful information, not just a big collection of information around energy or climate change. So in terms of how you contribute to the system, there's actually many ways to do that, whether that's actually on an external social platform like Facebook or sharing information directly and commenting on the system itself. I've got a screenshot here of just a recent discussion that we had on Facebook from one of our weekly posts that we put out there called Decarbonise 5. We're really focused on the newest technologies that are out there for decarbonization. And as you can see, we're sort of engaging with the community and generating some pretty good interest. I wrote a blog just a couple days ago around what's happening with big energy projects in Africa. So it's 5 countries in Africa that are really having an impact in terms of climate change solutions. And once again, we had a pretty active discussion, and one of the things that we learned out of the discussion was that there were a whole bunch of projects happening in Ethiopia that we actually weren't worried about and we weren't tracking in Decarbonize. So it's a really good example of how people contributing online is going to help build the Decarbonize platform. And then a key part of this is, as I said earlier, is that we don't want to just put any information on the Decarbonize platform. We really need expert reviewers to play a part, and that's a model that we're continuing to build and get better at. So any piece of information on Decarbonize goes through at least 2 subject matter expert reviews before it's published. And so that's a process that we're really making sure that we stick to, and a lot of times it's gone through more reviewers than that. And so that's really a big part of the way that we're ensuring that there's quality information, even if it's coming through a whole bunch of different online channels. We're also looking for, effectively you could say, content partners. And we've got lots of organizations that we've got publishing agreements with. People also can come directly to the platform and submit content online. And we've actually had a couple cases recently where this has actually just happened, and we've got a number of publications that have actually come through. So you can go directly to the platform. There's a Submit Your Solution button, and that would allow you to submit the content. You can upload a piece of content and actually add additional details. Because we're really focusing on making sure that we follow all appropriate copyright rules and that we actually ensure that it's high quality content, that the review process might take some time. but we think in the long run this is actually a much better process for our user community. Okay, before I hand over to Brian, I'm just going to go through three special features of the platform itself. And these are sort of special features of the web architecture. And so the first point is that what we're really trying to do is optimize information access to the system. And so many of our visitors arrive through search engines, particularly through Google. We actually take the content and do a lot of conversions to the information, convert it into other languages in some cases, and actually push this out to other web publishing platforms as a way to really disseminate this information access. So the information accessibility challenges on a couple 100-page report are pretty significant, right? And so what we found over the last couple of years is actually getting this information into different formats like HTML and into ebooks can actually really help this process and improve readership. The other real challenge we've got is once people are on the platform is how do you actually improve findability of access to information. And so what we're doing is we're actually classifying our information in a way that we've actually never done before or in a much more sophisticated way. So we've done a lot of automatic classification, but that's actually behind the scenes kind of bolstered by human brain power. We've got about 1,200 different terms that we actually link to through all our publications. And because we've converted them into different formats such as HTML, we can actually automatically do this linking in a way that we couldn't if the report was like just a PDF. So you could think of this in some ways as turning the whole Decarbonise platform, which is, as I said today, over 21,000 resources, into like a giant Wikipedia for decarbonization. And we think that this is a really virtuous model that we're going to keep building on into the future. So whereas we're at 21,000 today, I think this number is just going to keep going up and up. And the way we've actually built our technical solutions, it allows us to do this without actually growing our team too significantly. We can use kind of a combination of automatic web technology behind the scenes and our network of experts to really drive the approach forward. And then the final special feature that I wanted to highlight was something that we call terminal sites. And what a terminal site for us is really another website that uses information from Decarbonise. And so a good example of this is this link I've got in front of you here. This is the European Commission's CCS project network. So what we do is we put all the Commission's publications onto the Decarbonise system, but the network certainly wanted to have their own brand and visual identity. So they are then pushed to the EC project network, to their website. And so think of this as achieving a few things. It got the Commission an advanced web platform for reasonably low cost and quite quick to market approach. So we replaced an existing platform and gave them a much better capability than they had before. It also gets their information out to a much wider audience, but at the same time maximizes their brand impact. So this model is actually what we use for our own corporate website as well. So all the information is centrally loaded on Decarbonise, but then it's pushed to the corporate site. So once again, this is a model that's really working for us effectively today, and we look to roll out more and more of these terminal sites into the future. And if you're interested in something like that, just please contact us. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Brian, who's going to take us through how we're actually engaging with our community and who we think the most important aspects of that community are.
Thanks, John. So when we built Decarbonise, we were thinking about three distinct audiences that we wanted to target for our web community. The first one is the project delivery audience. So these are people who are actually professionals working on clean energy projects, who are out on the field, who may actually need some information for the purposes of doing their job. So they may be looking up certain bit of statistics or some really deep technical knowledge that they need to find for just getting their job done and getting their work done. And so that in most cases would be in our publication section. In the publications that we've aggregated, we have a lot of quite deep technical information on lots of different decarbonization topics. And we've made an interface that makes it quite easy for these professionals to actually dig into those publications and find exactly what they're looking for. Likewise, as an added value feature for those publications is a lot of the terms are cross-linked. So if they're looking for a particular term in their field, they can actually find which publications have that information and really take a deep dive into the topics they're looking for. So that's how we're serving that first professional audience. The second audience is what we call an enabling audience. And so those are people who are also professionals, but maybe aren't working on the coal face of a clean energy project, but are actually doing other types of research or seeking information. And those are economists and policy analysts, educators, people who have a pretty high level of knowledge already about clean energy and decarbonization technology, but are just looking to bolster sort of the information that they're after. And so that would also be in our publication section, and also in our insights as well. We would have quite a bit of information for that subset of people. And then the third group is a subset of the general public, which we call the Technocracy crowd, and I'll talk a little bit more about them. And that's kind of these are like the citizen scientists, the people who are really excited about clean energy. You know, the internet has sort of enabled this group of people to actually to get their voice out there and to actually find a lot more information than they would have been able to find otherwise. So we want to provide them with an easy way to kind of dig into the information as deeply as they want to. So that would generally start out with an insight, which is our form of a blog. And what they can do is, because all of those blogs are linked in with the deeper information in our publications, they can actually sort of dive down to the level that they're comfortable with. So we give a general, a kind of a more populist overview in our insights, and then we have you know, lots of links in those into kind of quite deep topics and quite deep technical information. So, you know, as deeply as these guys want to go down, they can do it through our insights and through our publications. So those are the three main groups that we're trying to target with Decarbonize. And the next slide we'll look a little bit deeper into how we do that. Okay, so our vision is to we want to engage with this technocracy crowd. So this is the group that's the kind of the movers and shakers out there. They're the ones posting on Facebook and on Reddit, and they're really fired up about decarbonization technology. We're finding that that's actually where a lot of the message is getting out. It's not being driven from the people who are actually running the projects. It's being driven by the citizen scientists and people who are really excited about what's happening with decarbonization. So we kind of want to get behind that positive message and help them out with as much material as we can, as much accurate, sort of well-informed, science-based material that we can find and we can aggregate on the Decarbonize site. So there is a really big crossover between sort of this clean energy science area and these technology enthusiasts. So technology enthusiasts, generally, when you think about that, you talk about like IT technology, you know, people who are quote-unquote computer nerds or who follow, you know, internet web communities and that kind of thing. But we have found that there's a really large subset of those people who are very fired up about clean energy science. And that is a big audience that Decarbonize is trying to capture, because those are the people who have actually quite a large voice out in these different communities. So you can see there below some of the communities that we're actually engaging in. So we're quite well represented in Reddit. So we engage in a lot of discussions there. We're on Facebook, of course. IndieGoGo, which is a crowdfunding website. We do some work there. Quora, which is a deep question and answer site, and of course Twitter. So we try to get across all of these communities and get our content out there, and also get people sort of this technocracy crowd engaging in those communities. As an example of one of the successes we had engaging in external communities is we got contacted by someone who was a frequent poster in the environment channel on Reddit. So the environment channel is actually a Reddit sub-channel where people kind of collect to talk about issues related to the environment. And it has probably around 30 to 40,000 active members who are actually posting and leaving comments and voting up articles. So we were active in that sub-community. We were actually contacted by a board member for the Lawrenceville Plasma Physics Lab, and they were holding a crowdfunding event to try and get some funds for their fusion reactor design that they were doing, and they were doing this through IndieGoGo. So it was a really great project where they were raising some money to build a new test reactor for a fusion project, and this was something that people were really excited about on Reddit. And so what we did was we actually got one of the board members onto Decarbonise, and we held a pretty in-depth interview with him, and we got all the details on what the project was trying to do, what was happening in the fusion world as a whole. Maybe Sean, if you go ahead and jump to the next slide, we can look a little bit at the interview itself. And it was in a nice format that people could feel free to sort of read and then ask questions about either on Reddit or on other communities as well. So this was quite successful in that it got a lot of people engaged with the content on Decarbonise, and also asking questions and talking with the subject of the interview, Dennis Peterson, on these external communities like Reddit and also Facebook. So you can see here's the Reddit thread where people were discussing the article, and they were actually asking questions of Mr. Peterson on that thread, and he was giving really in-depth sort of quite technical answers to the crowd that was interested in. So this is a really engaged crowd that knows a lot about environmental technology already, but wanted more information. And so Decarbonise is sort of serving as a bridge between these people who are talking about technology and the actual science itself. So we collect the interviews and the publications and the other information these crowds are really hungry for, that they need to either back up their arguments or to give more depth to discussions they're having. And this was a really successful foray into kind of that area of sort of citizen scientists, deep technology. And we had success with a lot of other ones. I think Sean mentioned he did a great piece on some countries in Africa and what they were doing with clean energy projects. That's another kind of, it's more in the public engagement and capacity development type areas that is really quite popular on areas on Facebook and Reddit and other sites like that. So it's been quite successful in engaging in these external communities. So one of the concepts that we decided from the outset was that we weren't going to actually host much in the way of community on Decarbonise itself. We decided that there are these other external communities that are doing a much better job of that. So we wanted to go where the discussions were actually happening and where people were talking about decarbonization and clean energy science. So we decided that we would engage in these external communities like Reddit, like Facebook and Twitter and other sites like that, and we would draw people back to look at our content, but then to go off and talk about it in these external communities. So it's a pretty important shift and an important concept in the way we talk about community management and community building for an online website. So in the past, it's been all about sort of drawing people into your website and sort of to have the discussions on your site, so you kind of own that that exchange and it's part of your content. But I think increasingly that the internet has become so distributed and so big, and there are so many sort of discrete communities talking about particular subjects, that we really wanted to be just the broker of the information. We wanted to have the authoritative science, publications, insights, and other information that people could use and reference in their external discussions. And so far, we've only been around for a few months now, but it's proven to be a pretty successful strategy, and we're going to continue on in that way. So with that, I guess I will hand back to Sean for any questions around the webinar.
Cool. Thanks, Brian. I'm just, give me a second here. I'm just going through the questions that we've got from the audience. And what I'll be doing for the audience is actually I'll answer some of these, and then some I'll probably hand back to Brian. Some we actually both might answer. So just give me a sec here. So the first question, what is your most popular content so far? So so good question. So historically, our most popular content has been by far our publications, and so that was when the information was out on our corporate website. That's actually changed with the launch of Decarbonise. The most popular content has actually been our insights, and that's probably for two primary reasons. The first is that actually we're pushing that content out the most heavily to our social channels. So if we're going to push things out to Facebook or Reddit, in the first instance, we're primarily pushing things that people can read in a fairly short amount of time. And then that, in many cases, is drawing them further to publications. So that has actually been the most popular content that we've actually put out so far, although some of our kind of detailed depublications are still very popular. The other thing is, whenever you launch a new web platform, you sort of got to rebuild your profile through Google, and a lot of our publications have been very interesting from a deep content search perspective, and that's probably going to take a couple more months to actually catch up. But yeah, it's been really pleasing thus far in the first few months how popular some of our insights have been. Have you had many people submitting content? We have had people submitting content, and it's actually starting to build more and more. So we have a few ways that we source the content for our platform. The first is that we actually we've commissioned some help to actually from people that have expertise to help us source what are the best kind of publications that we have out on a variety of topics, and then we actually have a republishing strategy for that involves going and contacting the organizations. We also do our own research on this. We're looking at news clips that come in. We're looking at the references of publications and actually seeing what's other good information out there, and then we take it through the review process for publishing. But we've had people submitting also directly through our site publications for republishing. We just had 4 come through the other day. So that model is also starting to work. We've had actually a couple publications that were quite interesting, but we didn't have the expertise yet to be able to take them through a proper review process as well. So we actually had some carbon capture papers that were really, really technical that we want to make sure to take it through a proper technical review. And it was just detailed things that we actually didn't have the skills on yet. But we're actually going through that process now, and we'll get those things published. Brian, I didn't know if you had any other comments on that subject from what you've been doing in terms of external engagement.
Well, I think a lot of times we're actually hitting professional scientists and researchers in these communities, and when we're talking about things in our insights, often it does sort of engage them and get them to want to submit publications. So a lot of the publications that have come in sort of on a voluntary basis have been those from individual researchers who found our content and decided that they want their content to be part of the collection.
Yeah, that sounds good, Brian. Another question that I'll actually first put to yourself, do you know if mainstream media are monitoring the site?
Well, they probably are, although we're purposefully engaging more with the technical sites. So we find that often there are other sites that kind of sort of skim along the surface of clean energy and don't really dive very deep into the technical side of it. So we sort of seed that market to these other communities. Where our strength is actually sort of diving deep and explaining a lot of the technical things that are happening. And this often isn't really a depth that the mainstream media wants to go to, but it certainly is one where the technical sites and the sort of engaged technical communities do want this sort of deep information, and so that's where we've had most of our focus so far.
Yeah, I'll just add on what Brian said. So we've been pretty light touch in terms of any specific media promotion, although we actually have done some stuff recently with our web hosting provider, Rackspace, that really liked our approach. So we just did some interviews for more IT-oriented media. So I did an interview for ZDNet in Australia last week. They're very interested in some of the specific things that we've done from a web architecture perspective. But as Brian said, that we're trying to engage, our first priority has actually been trying to engage socially with people off the site, but we're hoping that we'll continue to get good media interest in terms of what we're doing. Brian, another question's come through. Can you give me more information on the Fusion interview, and then kind of a couple of subpoints that was it done in real time and how much time and planning was needed?
It was done in real time. We actually did it over Google Chat, which is actually a really nice way to do it, because if you if you're doing something on a text-based medium to start with, the transcription process of actually creating the interview makes it quite easy. So we went through a couple of different drafts, and of course we did put in quite a bit of links to background information either on Decarbonise or on external sites as well. So it was something that we built between us over a span of about a week. But the initial interview was done quite quickly over just text-based chat, and that's a really good way to do it.
Yeah, that sounds good, Brian. So the question also was asked, follow-up, do you use any voice typing software? And I think the answer to that is you're actually doing a lot of text-based chat, and you're able to copy that into the main interview?
Yeah, that's right. It works when both of you can type. Otherwise, things go pretty slowly. My high school typing class is probably the best class I ever had in high school, so I'm glad that at least so far that's been working on just doing the text-based. I have done interviews in the past where people tend to be quite slow on the keyboard. In those cases, you're probably better off just recording it and then doing a sort of transcription afterwards. I've used like some dictate software like Drag and Dictate before, and it works fine for one person, but when you try to have multiple people in there with multiple accents, it's a bit tough.
Yeah, that sounds good. Actually, related question to that, because this is the one area where we've done work with IndieGoGo. So what are you doing with IndieGoGo?
So IndieGoGo is a crowdfunding site, and when there are active campaigns on IndieGoGo or Kickstarter, or there's actually quite a few crowdfunding sites now. Those are the kind of things that we would review. Generally, we would sort of engage one of our experts to sort of measure the validity and sort of the rigor of the project. And if it's something that we feel sort of fits within a larger decarbonization framework, it's the kind of thing that we're happy to support. It's in the case of the fusion reactor project. That's fusion reactors. If we finally get there, which is I think from the interview you'll see that they're quite hopeful. It would be a boon to decarbonization. So it's certainly something that we wanted to get behind. And there's quite an active community on Reddit that sort of promotes fusion technology as a way to decarbonize our energy sources in the future.
I'm going to take these in order. I think that's quite logical here. So, first, do you worry, Brian, that the community is engaging outside your website? I think it's a good question for yourself.
Well,
so if what I mean by that is, I think they mean so if you're talking about not just out on our site where you can comment, but on these things like LinkedIn and Reddit, does that concern us at all that most of the audience is actually out there?
Sure. Yeah, I suppose one of the things that people seek when they're building their own web platform is control, and you certainly are ceding a bit of that control when you say your community engagement is going to happen externally to your own website. But for us, it was sort of a pragmatic decision. We could have built some really quite complex, commenting functionality or like a forum type place where people could engage, but the reality is that these people in these communities are already out there and going strong, and they have their own culture that they have built in places like Reddit. And so we made a conscious decision that we wanted to go where the people were, instead of trying to necessarily draw people into a new community within our own site. So so far it's proven quite effective. I would definitely say sites like Reddit, which build themselves as sort of the front page of the internet, are really good for this. But more than being the front page of the internet, these channels, they're almost sort of fractally layered. You can go as deep as you want. They get quite particular. There's channels on fusion reactors and the environment in general, bioenergy, and all these great sort of technical topics that we're writing about. And there's kind of ready-made communities and audiences waiting to engage with us there. So that was kind of a no-brainer decision for us to actually engage externally rather than try and create a new community within the site.
Yeah, if I could just build on what Brian said, we are actually trying to go where our audience is as opposed to always having them just come to us. And that philosophy is also why the Global CCS Institute is actually launched Decarbonise, right? So we know that there's actually a lot of interest in these other decarbonization technologies. We think CCS is part of the answer to decarbonization, but we actually think the best way to do that is actually to try to bring in those people and actually reach out to people that are interested in other technologies that we also think are important, as opposed to actually just kind of pushing out a CCS message. And so we know a lot of people actually, as that understand these other technologies, if they understood CCS as well, we think that they'll actually be positively oriented to that approach. Once again, we're not really trying to hammer them with CCS information all the time. What we're trying to do is actually just get the best information from projects and let people really make their own decisions around the path forward. But actually, the best way to do that is actually to get in front of that audience, and that's what we're trying to do. I see two more questions here. The first is probably more of a comment than a question, which is actually around the GHD12 conference, and the comment is more, it would be actually useful to coordinate with them and get more of their content onto public domain. It's a really good comment. It's completely in line with the philosophy that we have here with Decarbonize, right? And if you look at the GHDT conferences, where you've got people from around this big conference, lots of great technologists there in particular, that are actually submitting their content to be then presented at the event. We'd love to find a way to actually get that information out to a wider audience. So I think it's a really good suggestion. There's other events like this as well, and frankly, this is just what Decarbonize was built for. It's actually to try to find the best information out there and then actually share it with a wider audience. With GHD12, you've got the same kind of goals, right? You've actually got people that are trying to get the best information. They read the abstracts, and then the best papers are selected for posters, or beyond that, the really best ones are selected for presentations, right? And so they're going through that kind of same kind of quality control process, and I think it's the kind of model that we could follow in the digital space as well, and it's a good example of the types of groups that we need to do more coordination with. The final question is a good one to finish with, is what's next for Decarbonize, and kind of where to go from here. As Brian and I have both said, we're pretty early in the journey. So we launched on March 17th the Decarbonize platform. So it's just been a couple months. We're really happy with how things have gone so far, but there's a long way to go. We're at the beginning of the journey. So what the journey means for us is actually finding more good information for our audience that we know is actually going to relate to them. That's actually going to also be of the highest quality nature, and then reaching out more to those external communities. We've actually had really positive results through social channels just in the last couple of weeks. So we're still at the point now where we're learning new things, and we're learning what our audience is interested in, and how they want to engage with us. And I expect over the next couple months that we'll just keep getting better at what we're doing. So I guess the only point I'd make is Decarbonize is in many ways a community platform, right? So it's not exactly like Wikipedia, so people aren't editing content online as much. They're actually finding the best information to republish it. It goes through a quality gate process, but in other ways it's sort of the same kind of thing, right? So for Decarbonize to work, we actually need external publishing partners and external collaboration to really get and find the best content and then republish it on the platform. Brian, any other comments you'd like to add? And a couple more questions have come through.
No, I think that's right. I mean, when you say community, you're right, Sean. And I mean, it's although we were seeding like those other kinds of community activities, like commenting and sort of discussions that are happening externally, it is a community in the sense that people are submitting content and sort of deciding and engaging with us to decide what types of topics we'll actually be having on the Decarbonize platform.
Sounds good. I misread. They're actually not comments coming through. They're just thanks for having this during good time zone hours, and some suggestions around other sites we can republish with. So look, with that, I'm going to finish this up early, but there's been some really good comments. I hope people found this useful. We're going to do another webinar tomorrow that's more oriented towards European time zones, and we'll be publishing this the comments for the webinar itself, as well as the responses to questions all online in an Insight pretty soon after this, probably within the next week. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining. Thanks, Brian, for being my co-presenter. And I hope everyone has a good day or a good night.